Committee will please come to order. Judge, tough day and tough night for you, I know. Let me ask, do you have anything you'd like to say before we begin? I understand that your preference is, which is totally and completely understandable, that we go 1 hour tonight, 30 minutes on each side. Am I correct in that?
That's right.
Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Senator, I would like to start by saying unequivocally, uncategorically, that I deny each and every single allegation against me today that suggested in any way that I had conversations of a sexual nature or about pornographic material with Anita Hill, that I ever attempted to date her, that I ever had any personal sexual interest in her, or that I in any way ever harassed her. A second, and I think more important point, I think that this today is a travesty. I think that it is disgusting. I think that this hearing should never occur in America. This is a case in which this sleaze, this dirt, was searched for by staffers of members of this committee, was then leaked to the media, and this committee and this body validated it and displayed it at prime time over our entire nation. How would any member on this committee, any person in this room, or any person in this country would like sleaze said about him or her in this fashion, or this dirt dredged up in this gossip and these lies displayed in this manner? How would any person like it? The Supreme Court is not worth it. No job is worth it. I'm not here for that. I'm here for my name, my family, my life, and my integrity. I think something is dreadfully wrong with this country when any person in this free country would be subjected to this. This is not a closed room. There was an FBI investigation. This is not an opportunity to talk about difficult matters privately or in a closed environment. This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a Black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity Blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
We will have, yes. Would you like to say that?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator from South Carolina.
I have named Senator Hatch to cross-examine the judge and then those who are supporting him. So Senator Hatch, you and I take over.
As I understand it, it was, you don't know
I think that's correct. I think we would start with
yes.
with Senator Heflin and then go to Senator Hatch.
Sure,
That's
sure, I think that's the way I was, I'd be happy to do it, but I think that's the way I was told.
Senator Heflin.
Judge Thomas, in addition to Anita Hill, there have surfaced some other allegations against you. One was on a television show last evening here in Washington, Channel 7. I don't know whether you saw that or not. You didn't see it. It was carried somewhat in the print media today, but it involved a man by the name of Earl Harper Jr., who allegedly was a senior trial lawyer with the EEOC at Baltimore in and around the early 80s. Do you recall this instance pertaining to Earl Harper Jr.?
I remember the name. I can't remember the details.
The allegations against Mr. Harper involved some 12 or 13 women who claimed that Mr. Harper made unwelcome sexual advances to several women on his staff, including instances in which Mr. Harper masturbated in the presence of some of the female employees. The allegations contain other aspects of sexual activity. The information we have is that the general counsel of the EEOC, David Slate, made a lengthy internal investigation and found that this had the effect of creating an intimidating, hostile, and offensive working environment. And that on November the 23rd, 1983, you wrote Mr. Slate a memo urging that Mr. Harper be fired. Mr. Slate eventually recommended dismissal. Then the story recites that you did not dismiss him, that you allowed him to stay on for 11 months, and then he retired. Does that bring back to you any recollection of that event concerning Mr. Earl Harper Jr.?
Again, I'm operating strictly on recollection. If I remember the case, if it's the one I'm thinking of, Mr. Harper's supervisor recommended either suspension or some form of sanction or punishment that was less than termination. When that proposal, the supervisor initially was not David Slate. When that proposal reached my desk, I believe my recommendation was that for the conduct involved, he should be fired. The problem there was that if the immediate supervisor's decision is changed, and I believe Mr. Harper was a veteran, there are a number of procedural protections that he had, including a hearing, and of course he had a lawyer, and there was potential litigation, etc. I don't remember all of the details, but it's not as simple as you set it out. It was as a result of my insistence that the general counsel, as I remember, upgraded the sanction to termination.
Do you know a congressman by the name of Scott Klug, a Republican congressman who was defeated Robert Kastenmeier from Wisconsin, who now serves in Congress, who back in the early 80s, 83 or something, was a television reporter for a channel here in Washington, and that he, at that time, disclosed this as being indicating that after the recommendation of dismissal, that you did not move in regards to it for some 11 months and let him retire. Do you know Congressman Klug?
I do not know him. Again, I remember I'm operating on recollection. There was far more to it than the facts as you set them out. His rights had much to do with the fact that he was a veteran and that we could not simply dismiss him. If we could, that was my recommendation, he would have been dismissed.
There was no political influence brought to bear on you at that time to prevent his dismissal. Do you recall if any political influence?
No political influence. In fact, it was my policy that no personnel decisions would in any way be changed or influenced by political pressure, one way or the other.
Now, it's reported to me that Congressman Klug, after your nomination, went to the White House and told this story, and that I hear by hearsay that the White House ignored his statement, that Congressman Klug further came to the Senate Judiciary Committee and made it known here. And as far as I know, I attempted to check, I hadn't been able to find where it was in the Judiciary Committee, if it was, and I think the chairman has attempted to locate. But the point I'm asking is, in your process pertaining to the nomination and the preparation for it, were you ever notified that Congressman Klug went to the White House in regards to this?
I don't remember that, Senator.
Nobody ever discussed that with
No.
you? Well, that's the way it's been reported to me, and it's very fragmented and relative to it, but I have asked that all the records of the EEOC be subpoenaed by subpoena ducis tecum pertaining to that, in order that we might get to the bottom of it.
Interrupt Senator Heflin. I really think this is outside the scope under the rules. I would have to object to.
I would have to sustain that objection. I do not.
I hesitate to object. I just think that you keep it on the subject matter.
I do not see what's
Well, I think it is relevant in the issue pertaining to period of time relative to the issue, and particularly in regards to the responsibilities as head of an agency dealing with discrimination in employment.
If I may say, let me speak. If I may say, this is not about whether or not the judge administered properly or improperly the agency. The only issue here relates to conduct and the allegations that have been made. So I would respectfully suggest to my friend from Alabama that that line of question is not in order, and I rule it out of order.
All right, sir. I'll reserve an exception, as we used to say. Now, You, I suppose, have heard Professor Hill, Ms. Hill, Anita F. Hill testify today.
No, I haven't.
You didn't listen?
No, I didn't. I've heard enough lies.
You didn't listen to her testimony?
No, I didn't.
On television?
No, I didn't. I've heard enough lies. The day is not a day that, in my opinion, is high among the days in our country. This is a travesty. You've spent the entire day destroying what it has taken me 43 years to build and providing a forum for that.
Well, Judge Thomas, you know, we have a responsibility too. And as far as I'm involved, I had nothing to do with Anita Hill coming here and testifying. We're trying to get to the bottom of this, and if she is lying, then I think you can help us prove that she was lying.
Senator, I am incapable of proving the negative. It did not occur.
Well, if it did not occur, I think you are in a position with certainly your ability to testify to, in effect, to try to eliminate it from people's minds.
Senator, I didn't create it in people's minds. This matter was investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in a confidential way. It was then leaked last weekend to the media. I did not do that. And how many members of this committee would like to have the same scurrilous, uncorroborated allegations made about him and then leaked to national newspapers and then be drawn and dragged before a national forum of this nature to discuss those allegations that should have been resolved in a confidential way?
Well, I certainly appreciate your attitude towards leaks. I happen to serve on the Senate Ethics Committee, and it's been a sieve.
Well, but it didn't leak on me. This leaked on me, and it is drowning my life, my career, and my integrity. And you can't give it back to me, and this committee can't give it back to me, and this Senate can't give it back to me. You have robbed me of something that can never be restored.
I know exactly how you feel.
Judge Thomas, one of the aspects of this is that she could be living in a fantasy world. I don't know. We're just trying to get to the bottom of all of these facts. But if you didn't testify, I think you put yourself in an unusual position. You, in effect, are defending yourself. And basically, some of us want to be fair to you, fair to her. But if you didn't listen to what she said today, then that puts it somewhat in a more difficult task to find out what the actual facts are relative to this matter.
The facts keep changing, Senator. When the FBI visited me, the statements to this committee and the questions were one thing. The FBI's subsequent questions were another thing. And the statements today, as I received summaries of them, were another thing. It is not my fault that the facts change. What I have said to you is categorical, that any allegations that I engage in any conduct involving sexual activity, pornographic movies, attempted to date her, any allegations, I deny. It is not true. So the facts can change, but my denial does not. Mr. Hill was treated in a way that all my special assistants were treated. Cordial, professional, respectful.
Judge, if you're on the bench and you approach a case where you appear to have a closed mind and that you are only right, doesn't it raise issues of judicial temperament?
Senator, there is a big difference between approaching a case objectively and watching yourself being lynched. There is no comparison whatsoever.
He has personal knowledge of this as well, and personal justification for anger.
Judge, I don't want to go over this stuff, but of course there are many instances in which she has stated, but and in fact, since you didn't see her testify, I think it's somewhat unfair to ask you specifically about it. I would reserve my time and go ahead and let Senator Hatch ask you and then come back.
Senator Hatch.
Okay. Judge Thomas, I've sat here and I've listened all day long. And Anita Hill was very impressive. She's an impressive law professor. She's a Yale Law graduate. And when she met with the FBI, she said that you told her about your sexual experiences and preferences. And I hate to go into this, but I want to go into it because I have to. And I know it's something that you wish you'd never heard at any time or place. But I think it's important that we go into it. And let me just do it this way. She said to the FBI that you told her about your sexual experiences and preferences. That you asked her what she liked, or if she had ever done the same thing. That you discussed oral sex between men and women. That you discussed viewing films of people having sex with each other and with animals. And that you told her that she should see such films. And that you like to discuss specific sex acts and the frequency of sex. What about that?
Senator, I would not want to accept being required to here to dignify those allegations with a response. As I've said before, I categorically deny them. To me, I have been pilloried with scurrilous allegations of this nature. I have denied them earlier, and I deny them tonight.
Judge Thomas, today, in a news statement, in addition to what she told the FBI, which I have to agree with you is quite a bit. She made a number of other allegations. And what I'd like to do is, some of them most specific were for the first time today in addition to these, which I think almost anybody would say are terrible. Now, I'd just like to give you an opportunity, because this is your chance to address her testimony. At any time, did you say to Professor Hill that she could ruin your career if she talked about sexual comments you allegedly made to her?
No.
Did you say to her in words or substance that you could ruin her career?
No.
Should she ever have been afraid of you and any kind of vindictiveness to ruin her career?
Senator, I have made it my business to help my special assistants. I recommended Ms. Hill for her position at Oral Roberts University. I've always spoken highly of her. I had no reason prior to the FBI visiting me a little more than 2 weeks ago to know that she harbored any ill feelings toward me or any discomfort with me. This is all new to me.
It's new to me too, because I read the FBI report at least 10 or 15 times. I didn't see any of these allegations I'm about to go into, including that one. But she seemed to sure have a recollection here today. Now, did you ever say to Professor Hill in words or substance, and this is embarrassing for me to say in public, but it has to be done. And I'm sure it's not pleasing to you. Did you ever say in words or substance something like, there is a pubic hair in my Coke?
No, Senator.
Did you ever refer to your private parts in conversations with Professor Hill?
Absolutely not, Senator.
Did you ever brag to Professor Hill about your sexual prowess?
No, Senator.
Did you ever use the term long dong silver in conversation with Professor Hill?
No, Senator.
Did you ever have lunch with Professor Hill at which you talked about sex or pressured her to go out with you?
Absolutely not.
Did you
I
ever
have
tell
had no such discussions, nor have I ever pressured or asked her to go out with me beyond her work environment.
Did you ever tell Professor Hill that she should see pornographic films?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever talk about pornography with Professor Hill?
I did not discuss any pornographic material or pornographic preferences or pornographic films with Professor Hill.
So you never even talked or described pornographic materials with her?
Absolutely not.
Well, most of those are in addition.
What I have told you is precisely what I told the FBI on September 25th when they shocked me with the allegations made by Anita Hill.
Judge Thomas, those are a lot of allegations. Those are a lot of charges. Talking about sexual experiences and preferences, whether she liked her, had ever done the same thing, oral sex, viewing films of people having sex with each other and with animals, that maybe she should see such films, discuss specific sex acts, talk about pubic hair and Coke, talking about your private parts, bragging about sexual prowess, talking about particular pornographic movies. Let me ask you something. You have dealt with these problems for a long time. At one time I was the chairman overviewing the EOC, and I might add the Department of Education. Now I'm the ranking member today, and I've known you for 11 years. And you're an expert, because you're the person who made the arguments to the then Solicitor General Freed that the administration should strongly take a position on sexual harassment cases in the Meritor Savings Bank v. Vinson case. And the Supreme Court adopted your position. Did I misstate that?
Senator, what you've said is substantially accurate. What I attempted to do in my discussions with the solicitor is to have them be aggressive in that litigation. And the EEOC was very instrumental in the success in the Meritor case.
Now, Judge, keep in mind that the statute of limitations under Title VII for sexual harassment for private employers is 180 days or 6 months. But the statute of limitations under Title VII for federal employers and employees is 30 days. Are you aware of that?
Yes, Senator, I'm generally aware of those
And
limitations.
are you aware of why those statutes of limitation are so short?
I would suspect that at some point it would have to do with the decision by this body that either memories begin to fade or stories change, perhaps individuals move around, and it would be more difficult to litigate them. I don't know precisely what all of the rationale is.
Well, it involves the basic issue of fairness, just exactly how you have described it. If somebody is going to be accused in a unilateral declaration of sexual harassment, then that somebody ought to be accused through either a complaint or some sort of a criticism, so that somebody can be informed and then respond to those charges, and if necessary, change that somebody's conduct. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's fair, Senator.
Now let me ask you something. I described all kinds of what I consider to be gross, awful, sexually harassing things, which, if you take them in accumulation, have to gag anybody. Now, you've seen a lot of these sexual harassment cases as you've served there at the EOC. What is your opinion with regard to what should have been done with those charges, and whether or not you believe that, let's take Professor Hill in this case, should have done something, since she was a Yale Law graduate who taught civil rights law at one point, served in these various agencies, and had to understand that there's an issue of fairness here?
Senator, if any of those activities occur, it would seem to me to clearly suggest or to clearly indicate sexual harassment. And anyone who felt that she was harassed could go to an EEO officer at any agency and have that dealt with confidentially. At the Department of Education, if she said it occurred there, or at EEOC. Those are separate tracks at EEOC. I do not get to review those if they involve me. And at the Department of Education, there's a separate EEO officer for the whole department. It would have nothing to do with me. But if I were an individual advising a person who'd been subjected to that treatment, I would advise her to immediately go to the EEO officer.
And the EEO office then would bring the parties together, or at least would confront the problem head on, wouldn't it?
The EEO officer would provide counseling.
Within a short period of time?
Within a short period of time, as well as, I think, if necessary, an actual charge.
So the charge would be made, and the charge would then, the person against whom it was made would have a chance to answer it right then, right up front, in a way that could resolve it and stop this type of activity if it ever really occurred.
That's right.
And you've just said it never really occurred.
It never occurred. That's why there was no charge.
See, one of the problems that has bothered me from the front of this thing is these are gross, accumulated. I don't know why anybody would put up with them, or why anybody would respect or work with another person who would do that. And if you did that, I don't know why anybody would work with you who suffered these treatments. Furthermore, I don't know why they would have gone to a different position with you. Even if they did think that maybe it had stopped and it won't start again, but then claim that it started again. And then when they finally got out into the private sector, wouldn't somehow or other confront these problems in 3 successive confirmation proceedings. Does that bother you?
This whole affair bothers me, Senator. I am witnessing the destruction of my integrity.
And it's by a unilateral set of declarations that are made on successive dates and different.
That's
by
true.
One person who continued to maintain what she considered to be a, quote, cordial, professional relationship with you over a 10-year period.
Senator, my relationship with Anita Hill prior to September 25th was cordial and professional. And I might add one other thing. If you really want an idea of how I treated women, then ask the majority of the women who worked for me. They're out here. Give them as much time as you have given one person, the only person who's been on my staff who's ever made these sorts of allegations about me.
Well, I think one of our senators, one of our better senators in the United States Senate, did do exactly that. And he's a Democrat. As a matter of fact, one of the fairest people, and I think one of the best new people in the whole Senate. This is a statement that was made on the floor of the Senate in this record by my distinguished colleague, Senator Lieberman, a man I have a great deal of respect for. Senator Lieberman's staff conducted a survey of various women who have worked for you over the years. He was concerned. He's been a supporter of yours. And he was one who asked for this delay so that this could be looked into because he was concerned too. But as a result of the survey, Senator Lieberman made the following statement. He said, I have contacted associates, women who worked with Judge Thomas during his time at the Department of Education and EOC, and in the calls that I and my staff have made, there has been universal support for Judge Thomas and a clear indication by all of the women we spoke to that there was never, certainly not, a case of sexual harassment and not even a hint of impropriety. That was put into the congressional record on October 8, 1991. And I think Senator Lieberman has performed a very valuable service because he's in the other party. He's a person who looks at these matters seriously. He has to be as appalled by this type of accusation as I am. And frankly, he wanted to know just what kind of a guy is Clarence Thomas. And those of us who know you know that all of these are inconsistent with the real Clarence Thomas. And I don't care who testifies, you have to keep in mind this is an attorney, law graduate from one of the 4 or 5 best law schools in this land, very intelligent, articulate law professor, and the only person on earth other than you knowing whether these things are true. The only other person. I don't blame you for being mad.
Senator, I have worked with hundreds of women in different capacities. I have promoted and mentored dozens. I will put my record against any member of this committee in promoting and
I will put your record against
women.
anybody in the whole Congress.
And I think that if you want to really be fair, you parade every single one before you and you ask them in their relationships with me whether or not any of this nonsense, this garbage, trash that you siphoned out of the sewers against me, whether any of it is true. Ask them. They've worked with me. Ask my chief of staff, my former chief of staff. She worked shoulder to shoulder with me.
Well, I think we should do that. Now, Judge, what was Professor Hill's role in your office at the Education Department and at the EEOC?
Senator, as I indicated this morning, at the Department of Education, Ms. Hill was an attorney advisor. I had a small staff, and she had the opportunity to work on a variety of issues.
She was your number one person?
She, by and large, on substantive issues, she was.
How about when you went to the EEOC?
At EEOC, that role changed drastically. As I indicated, my duties expanded immensely. EEOC, as you remember, had enormous management problems, so I focused on that. I also needed an experienced EEO staff, and my staff was much more mature. It was older. It was on a more experienced staff. As a result, she did not enjoy that close a relationship with me, nor did she have her choice of the better assignments. And I think that as a result of that, there was some concern on her part that she was not being treated as well as she had been treated prior to that.
At any time in your tenure in the Department of Education, Did Professor Hill ever express any concern about or discomfort with your conduct towards her?
No,
Never.
no. The only caveat I would add to that would be that from time to time people want promotions or better assignments or work hours, something of that nature, but no discomfort of the nature that is being discussed here today.
Now, I note that Professor Hill alleges improper conduct on your part during the period of November 1981 to February or March of 1982. Now, isn't it true that both you and Professor Hill moved from the Education Department to the EEOC in April of that same year?
Senator, that's an odd period. The president expressed his intent to nominate me to become chairman of EEOC in February of 1982. And during that very same period, to the best of my recollection, she assisted me in my nomination and confirmation process. And I did, in fact, leave actual work at the Department of Education, I believe in April, and started at EEOC in May of 1982. And she transferred with me.
So, in other words, Professor Hill followed you to the EEOC no more than 2 or 3 months, possibly only 1 month after she claims this alleged conduct occurred.
Precisely.
Isn't it true, Judge Thomas, that Professor Hill could have remained in her job at the Education Department when you went to the EEOC?
To the best of my recollection, she was a Schedule A attorney. I know she was not cleared through the White House, so she was not a Schedule C. She was not a political appointee. As a result, she had all the rights of Schedule A attorneys and could have remained at the Department of Education in a career capacity.
And even if she might not have remained the #1 person to the head of the Civil Rights Division, which you were, she would have been transferred to another equivalent attorney's position.
If she had requested.
Did you tell her anything to the contrary?
Not to my knowledge. In fact, I don't think it ever came up.
She didn't even ask.
I don't think it ever came up. I think it was understood that she would move to EEOC with me if she so
I
desired.
think just button it down. In other words, Judge Thomas, if instead of following you to the EEOC, Professor Hill had remained at the Department of Education as a Schedule A attorney, she would have had as much job security as any other civil service attorney in the government. And this is especially true, isn't it, because of your friendship with Harry Singleton?
That's right. If she was concerned about job security, I could have certainly discussed with Harry Singleton what should be done with him. He's a personal friend of mine. He's also, or was a personal friend of the individual who recommended Anita Hill to me, Gil Hardy. Gil Hardy, of course, drowned in 1988. But both of us, or all three of us, had gone to Yale Law School and knew each other quite well.
Now, Judge Thomas, I understand that on occasion, and you correct me if this is wrong, but I've been led to believe that on occasion, Professor Hill would ask you to drive her home, and that on those occasions she would sometimes invite you into her home to continue a discussion. But you never thought of anything, you never thought of any of this as anything but a more than normal, friendly or professional conversation with a colleague. Am I correct on that, or am I wrong?
It was not unusual to me, Senator. As I remember it, I lived in Southwest Washington and would, as I remember, and again, I'm relying on my recollection, she lived someplace on Capitol Hill, and I would drive her home and sometimes stop in and have a Coke or a beer or something and continue arguing about politics for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But I never thought much anything of it.
When Professor Hill worked for you at the EEOC, did she solicit your advice on career development or career opportunities?
Senator, as I discuss with most of the members of my personal staff, I try to advise them on their career opportunities and what they should do next. You can't always be a special assistant or an attorney advisor. And I am certain that I had those discussions with her. And in fact, it would probably have been based on that I advised Dean Cothe that she would be a good teacher and that she would be interested in teaching.
Did she treat you as as her mentor at the time, in your opinion?
Pardon me?
Did she treat you as though you were a mentor at the time?
She certainly sought counsel and advice from me.
Now, at any time during your tenure at the EEOC, did you ever discuss sexual matters with Professor Hill?
Absolutely not, Senator.
At any time during your tenure at the EOC, did Professor Hill ever express discomfort or concern about your conduct towards her?
No, Senator.
From your observations, what was the perception of Professor Hill by her colleagues at the EEOC? What did they think about her?
Senator, some of my former staffers, I assume, will testify here, but as I remember it, there was some tension and some degree of friction, which I attributed simply to having a staff. As I've had 2 weeks to think about this and to agonize over this. And as I remember it, I believe that she was considered to be somewhat distant and perhaps aloof. And from time to time, there would be problems that usually involved, and I attributed this to just being young, but usually involved her taking a firm position and being unyielding to the other members of the staff, and then storming off or throwing a temper tantrum of some sort that either myself or the chief of staff would have to iron out.
What was your opinion of the quality of Professor Hill's work at the EEOC as her administrator and as the head of the EEOC?
I thought the work was good. The problem was and it wasn't a problem, it was not as good as some of the other members of the staff.
While Professor Hill worked for you at the EEOC, did she ever seek a promotion?
I believe she did seek promotions. Again, most of that was done through the chief of staff at that time.
So to what position?
She may have sought a promotion. In 1983, my chief of staff left, and I was going to promote someone to my executive assistant / chief of staff, which is the most senior person on my personal staff. And I think that, and again, I'm relying on my memory, she aspired to that position and, of course, was not successful, and I think was concerned about that.
I see. When did Professor Hill leave the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission?
In 83.
In 83. Why do you think she decided to leave the agency at that time?
Senator, I thought that she felt that at the time that it was time for her to leave Washington and also to leave government. And she had, I believe, expressed an interest in teaching, and the opportunity at Oral Roberts University provided her both with the opportunity to be in Oklahoma and to teach. And as I remember, she did not lose any salary or any income in the bargain, and that was attractive.
Excuse me, did you assist her in getting that job at Oral Roberts University?
Yes, Senator. I discussed her with Dean Charles Kofi, both informally and provided written recommendation, formal recommendation for her.
All right. Have you had any contacts with Professor Hill since she left the EEOC in 1983?
Senator, from time to time, Anita Hill would call the agency and either speak to me or to my secretary, and through her she would leave messages. They had been friends, Diane Holt. And on a number of occasions, I believe two, I'm certain of one, but maybe two, when I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I spent time with her, I saw her, and I believe on one occasion she drove me to the airport and had breakfast with me.
Mr. Chairman, with unanimous consent, I would introduce into the record at this point excerpts from Judge Thomas's telephone logs from 1983 to 1991, if I could.
Without objection.
Now, Judge Thomas, do you have a copy of these?
Same excerpts that we have had.
These are the same ones that you have had. Now, Judge Thomas, are you familiar with these?
I have seen those logs, Senator.
Okay. Do you recall any of the telephone conversations with Professor Hill reflected by these particular messages?
I do, Senator.
For instance, on January 31st, according to these logs, and I think I've got them correct, I'm quite sure. On January 31st, 1984, at 11:30 a.m., a message from Anita Hill, quote, "Just called to say hello. Sorry she didn't get to see you last week," unquote. Is that accurate?
Yes, that was, I think, one instance when she had come to town, either on personal business or because of her job, and my schedule conflicted with her, with any opportunity to meet with her, and simply called to, that was a call from her, I think, to reflect that.
Okay, number 2, on May 9th, 1984 at 11:40 a.m., Anita Hill was the caller. The message was, please call. She left her phone number, 718, etc. Do you remember that?
Yes, and
Number 3, on August 29th, 1984 at 3:59 p.m., Anita called, and the message was, quote, needs your advice in getting research grants, unquote. Do you recall that?
I remember that.
What was
Senator.
that all about?
I can't remember exactly what the project was, but she wanted some ideas as to how she could get, I think, some grants, either from EEOC or some other agency, to do some research, I believe, at Oral Roberts. And I believe we discussed that, and I may have put her in contact with someone. My recollection of that is vague, but we did have a discussion.
Did you help her?
I tried.
You tried. Number 4, on August 30th, 1984 at 11:55 a.m., Anita was the caller. Message, returns your call. Call between 1 and 4. Remember that?
I don't remember the specifics of the call, but I remember that on the log. So
Was she calling you, or were you calling her?
she was calling me. My secretary, when I placed the call and someone returned it, my secretary noted, returned your call.
Okay, on January 3rd, 1985 at 3:40 p.m., Anita Hill was the caller. Quote, please call tonight, and then left a phone number and the room number. You remember that?
I remember that. I think she must have been in town on a trip, and that was her hotel room number. I don't know which hotel. And I, again, may have been out of town on either a business trip or somehow, for some other reason, inaccessible or unavailable.
Number 6, February 26, 1985, 5:50 p.m. Anita Hill was the caller. Again, it said, please call. Another call from her to you.
That's right.
Number 7, on March 4th, 1985 at 11:15 a.m., Anita Hill called again, quote, please call Ray Research Project, unquote. Remember that?
I remember that, Senator.
Did you help her?
We did. I think I can't remember the details, but I think she and Dean Charles Cothe were involved in some research on a fairly large project and wanted some data from EEOC, and I think we provided them with that data.
Number 8, March 4th, 1985, 11:25 a.m., call from Susan Cahill. Quote, with Tulsa EEO office referred by Anita to see if you would come to Tulsa on 3/27 to speak at the EEO conference, unquote. You remember that?
Yes, I remember the message. I think that was she would not otherwise have gotten through to me and used Anita's name in order to gain access to me and perhaps receive a positive response.
Mr. Chairman, I know my time's just about up, but I just want to finish this one line.
No, you have all the time you want.
All right, thanks. I really appreciate that. Number 9. Number 9 is July 5th, 1985 at 1:30 p.m. Anita Hill, the caller. Please call, with a number clearly out of town. Remember that?
Again, I remember reviewing my log, Senator.
Okay, number 10. October 8th, 1986. 12:25 p.m. Anita Hill called, message, please call, leaving a 405 area code number. Remember that?
Yes, Senator.
Number 11, August 4th, 1987, 4 o'clock p.m. Anita Hill caller. Quote, in town till 8:15, wanted to congratulate you on your marriage, unquote. Do you remember that?
I remember that, Senator, because one of the, my wife and I were on a delayed honeymoon in California when she came to town.
Number 12, November 1st, 1990, 11:40 a.m. Anita Hill, caller, Ray's speaking engagement at the University of Oklahoma School of Law. Remember that?
That was since I've been on the Court of Appeals, Senator.
12 phone calls between 1983 and 1990. Did you try to call her back each time?
Senator, I try to, whenever I received calls from her or from others, I attempted to return those calls. Although, as I indicated before you started through those series of calls, I remember the messages in the log themselves. I don't remember the nature of each call. It would be my practice to return those calls, especially from someone such as Anita.
So each and every time she called, you tried to call her back and tried to help her?
Senator, that is, the log reflects only those calls where she was unsuccessful in reaching me.
Did you ever call her other than to return these calls?
Senator, I may have. Anita Hill was someone that I respected and was cordial toward and felt positive toward and hopeful for her career. And I may have, on occasion, and I can't remember any specific occasion, picked up the phone just to see how she was doing. But again, the calls that you have there are the calls that are reflected or that reflect her inability to get in touch with me when she had called, as opposed to the instances in which she was able to contact me successfully.
Judge Thomas, before this day, have you seen Professor Hill on various occasions since she left the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission?
Yes, Senator, as I indicated, I recall seeing her, I'm certain of one time and perhaps twice, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And on one of those occasions, it is my recollection that we had dinner with Charles Cothe. We also had, Charles Cothe, the Dean of...
But was she there at that dinner?
She was at the dinner. We also had, we being Anita and myself, breakfast with Charles Cothe at his house. I usually slept at Charles Cothe's house. And I believe she drove me to the airport. And for some reason, I seem to remember that she had a Peugeot. I could be wrong on that. But I remember her being very proud of it because, to my recollection, she did not have a car in Washington.
I see. These, in addition to all the phone calls, you had these contacts and these meetings. How would you describe these meetings?
Very cordial, positive, always one. It's, as I treat my other special assistants, I tend to be the proud father type who sees his special assistants go on and become successful and feels pretty good about it. It would be that kind of a contact, as well as her telling me how her teaching assignments were going. Indeed, that was similar to the conversation, again, that I would have with my other special assistants, or former special assistants.
Overall, how would you characterize the nature of your contacts with Professor Hill since she left the EEOC in 1983?
They've been always very cordial and very positive, Senator.
Any unpleasantness?
Never.
Any problems ever raised?
No, Senator.
Any questions about your conduct?
No, Senator.
Can you think of any reason for her efforts to continue to try to be associated with you?
Senator, could you repeat the question, Senator?
Well, can you think of any real reason why she would want to continue these cordial professional relationship with you, or this cordial professional relationship with you?
Senator, I would hope it would have been for the same reasons that all of my other special assistants did, that I was very supportive of them. The people that, some of whom you will hear from today, who've flown in, certainly at their own expense, they feel warmly toward me and have a sense of loyalty, and feel that I will help them and that I will assist them as best I could. And I believe that that was a part of the reason, and we certainly enjoyed a cordial and professional relationship.
Well, before you first heard of Professor Hill's allegations during this confirmation process, did you have any reason to believe that she was unhappy with you?
Senator, on Tuesday, on September 24th, the day before I heard from the FBI I would have told you if you asked me that my relationship with Anita Hill was cordial, professional, and that I was very proud of her for all she'd done with her life and the things that she had accomplished.
Judge Thomas, this is your fourth confirmation in 9 years, isn't that correct?
Yes, Senator. It's either my... Yes, Senator, it is.
In fact, 3 of those confirmations occurred, I guess they were after, including this one, occurred after these allegations, at the time of the allegations by Professor Hill.
Actually, this, Senator, would be the fourth on the...
That's right, isn't it? It would be
This
the
would be
fourth.
the fourth.
So she actually has known you through 4 Senate confirmations. 4 of them. No, this is 4. So 4 Senate confirmations, right?
That's right.
And none of those have been very easy, have they?
That's right. Now that I think about it, none of my confirmations, aside from the first one, was easy.
And you had your critics in each and every one of them, didn't you?
That's right.
Do you remember the details of each of those calls that were made that we went over? Or do you just remember them generally?
I remember the calls generally, Senator. I don't remember the specifics of each call. That's been quite some time.
Well, let me just say this. I've kept everybody too long, and I know we can continue tomorrow. But I'd like to ask this question just to end the day with, and I think it's an important question. I have to say, cumulatively, these charges, even though they were made on all kinds of occasions, I mean, they're unbelievable that anybody could be that perverted. I'm sure there are people like that, but they're generally in insane asylums. What was your reaction when you first heard of these allegations against me? Just the first allegations, not all these other ones. And then you can tell me your reaction when you've heard of these ones that were brought forth the first time today.
Senator, when the FBI informed me of the allegation, the person first, there was shock, dismay, hurt, pain, and when he informed me of the nature of the allegations, I was surprised, disbelief, and again hurt. And I have reached a point over the last 2 weeks plus, I've reached a point that I can't go over each and every one of these allegations again. As I said in my statement this morning, that when you have allegations of this nature by someone that you think have thought the world of and felt that you've done the best for, it is an enormously painful experience. And it is one when you ask yourself, you rip at yourself, what could you have done? And why could this happen? Or why would it happen?
How do you feel right now, Judge, after what you've been through?
Senator, as I indicated this morning, it just isn't worth it. The nomination isn't worth it. Being on the Supreme Court isn't worth it. There is no amount of money that's worth it. There's no amount of money that can restore my name. Being an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court will never replace what I've been robbed of. I wouldn't recommend that anyone go through it. This has been an enormously difficult experience, but I don't think that that's the worst of it. I'm 43 years old. And if I'm not confirmed, I'm still the youngest member of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. I'll go on. I'll go back to my life of talking to my neighbors and cutting my grass and getting a Big Mac at McDonald's and driving my car, seeing my kid play football. I'll live. I'll have my life back. And all this hurt has brought my family and I closer, my wife and I, my mother. But that isn't, so there's no pity for me. I think the country has been hurt by this process. I think we are destroying our country, we are destroying our institutions, and I think it's a sad day when the U.S. Senate can be used by interest groups and hate mongers and people who are interested in digging up dirt to destroy other people and who will stop at no tactics when they can use our great institutions for their own political ends. We are gone far beyond McCarthyism. This is far more dangerous than McCarthyism. At least McCarthy was elected.
Judge, I have a lot of other questions to ask you, and I think they're important questions. And I think you deserve the opportunity to tell your side of this. And you've done it here so far. And I have to tell you, this has come down to this. One woman's allegations that are 10 years old against your lifetime of service over that same 10-year period. I've known you almost 11 years. And the person that the good professor described, not the person I've known. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow and about what went on there and about how this could have happened, how one person's allegations, uncorroborated, nobody else, it's all private, according to her, could tend to destroy a career and one of the most wonderful opportunities for a young man from Pinpoint, Georgia. Something that I think has lifted almost everybody up till these allegations were unfairly disclosed by someone on this committee and or their staff, maybe on this committee. And Mr. Chair.
I repeat what I said. I have been hurt by this deeply, and nothing is worth going through this. This has devastated me. It's devastated my family. It's untrue. They're lies. I have hundreds of women who work with me. You can call them. Dozens who work closely with me on my personal staff. You can call them. You can bring them up, give them as much airtime as you've given this one person with uncorroborated, scurrilous lies and allegations. Give them as much time. See what they say. But it's not just that, Senator. It's more that's happening. You are ruining the country. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody, anytime, over any issue. Our institutions are being controlled by people who will stop at nothing. They went around this country looking for dirt, not information on Clarence Thomas, dirt. Anybody with any dirt, anything, late night calls, calls at work, calls at home, badgering, anything, give us some dirt. I think that if our country has reached this point, we're in trouble, and you should feel worse for the country than you do for me.
I feel bad for both. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I've kept us over a little bit. I wish I could proceed even further tonight, but I think we'll wait till tomorrow morning I know everybody's dead tired. I'm sure you're dead tired. I know that. So,
Before
Mr.
we,
Chairman, thank you for giving me this extra time. You've always been courteous and decent, and frankly, you've run this committee through this whole process in a courteous and decent way, including you ran it right with regard to the FBI report as well. And then we on this side know that. So thank you.
You've been